Delaying care for these people is life-altering.
For the first time in 4 years, Kansas lawmakers had a hearing on Medicaid expansion. It's an issue that sparked a heated debate at the State House. You're taking a look inside Kansas politics. Welcome in. I'm Rebecca Chung. Opponents of Medicaid expansion are questioning the cost and its effectiveness, but supporters are calling on lawmakers to fill gaps in coverage. I was there for the hearing on Wednesday, and here's a look at what both sides are saying. Rooms filled wall to wall with people from across Kansas, all coming out to talk about Medicaid expansion.
Delaying care for these people is life-altering.
The House Health Committee talked about the governor's bill. It would expand Medicaid to 150,000 Kansans that fall in the coverage gap.
I can't quit my job, I can't go to the doctor, and I can't get Medicaid. That's that gap triangle that we find ourselves in too often when we're working with our consumers.
The bill would also include work requirements. Democrats attempting to address concerns from some Republicans about people taking advantage of the system.
It's a non-disabled, non-elderly adult of a certain age. That's by federal law, that person in other welfare programs is called, again, in law, an able-bodied adult.
During hearings, supporters laid out a long list of arguments, and one of the main ones include helping the state tackle its rural hospital crisis.
I saw the grim reality of uncompensated emergency care for uninsured Kansans drive up the cost of health care for insured Kansans.
Benjamin Anderson says he didn't support Medicaid expansion until working at a rural hospital himself.
Each year, our hospital had to scrape together the money to stay open, and around that time, we started seeing the financially distressed rural Kansas hospitals close their doors. This dynamic still exists today.
The governor's been pointing to data from a National Policy Institute, sounding the alarm on rural hospital closures in Kansas. As of last year, 58% of Kansas's rural hospitals were at risk of closing, and nearly 83% lost money on patient care. But some opponents are concerned about the cost, worrying that the state will be on the hook for money from the feds.
The costs will turn out to be higher than even the highest official projection during the debate.
As for whether the House bill will move forward, that will be up to the Republican chair of the committee. We asked her whether she plans on working the bill and moving it to the House floor. How likely are you to work this bill and send it to the House floor?
Well, the committee will decide whether it goes to the House floor or not, so we're looking at possibly working it.
All right, today we're talking with all sides on the issue. Joining our panel is Speaker of the Kansas House, Dan Hawkins, Executive Director of Alliance for a Healthy Kansas, April Holman, and political analyst Bob Beatty. All right. We can start now. That bill that we were mentioning in that story, it failed to pass out of the House committee just one day after the hearing. And at that hearing, there were hundreds of supporters of Medicaid expansion that wrote in. Still speaking with the chair after the meeting, she did indicate that her stance remains the same. She opposes Medicaid expansion. And one of the points opponents brought up during the hearing was that mainly able-bodied adults would be receiving coverage. So let's talk about it. Speaker Hawkins, let's start with you.
That is correct. The actual way it reads is age 19 to 64 able-bodied adults that is the population that is Medicaid expansion. A lot of times when I go out and talk with people, you'll hear people say, Medicaid expansion. I'll ask them, what is Medicaid expansion? And they'll say, yeah, it's helping out the frail and elderly or the disabled, whatever they say. But almost none of them really know that the true population for Medicaid expansion is 1964 able-bodied adults, people who can go to work. And if they go to work and they work enough to reach the federal poverty level, which is about 14,580, almost 15,000, then they can get on the ACA and have almost virtually all of their premiums paid for. It costs them 20 or 30 bucks a month, plus 95% of their out-of-pocket cost is paid for.
Okay, Director Holman, is that the stance from your organization? What's your take?
Well, I think that when we talk about able-bodied adults, really, I've just found out that's a term of art. And so what we think of as people who are able-bodied or who don't have a physical reason or a behavioral health reason for not being able to work that is not the definition that we're using here. So what we see is there are a lot of people who actually do have what we would consider a disability in everyday language. People who might have a chronic illness like heart disease or diabetes, or people who might have cancer, they don't qualify for the disability determination from the Social Security Department administration, but they absolutely have what we would think of as a disability. So I think it's a misnomer to think about everyone who's in the coverage gap as being able to go out and work. In some cases, people are limited in the amount of hours that they might be able to work. And when you look at the income thresholds, we talk about the coverage gap as being those people particularly who earn less than 100% of the federal poverty level. So that individual that Representative Hawkins talked about might be able, if they have a household of one, to qualify to be able to get those subsidies on the marketplace if they are earning $15,000. But there's a penalty if you have more people in your household. Mm-hmm. So if you have a child, or if you have 2 children, or even more, it becomes more difficult for you to meet that threshold and be able to get the subsidies on the marketplace. So we're talking about people who are really without options to get assistance so that they can get affordable health care.
Okay. And Speaker Hawkins, wanted to get back to you there. What did you think about what Director Holman was saying?
Well, able-bodied adult is actually, it's a federal term. That's what they call it. We didn't make it up. And they can work, and if they can work, they're going to be able to get on. They have options. They do have options. You know, I find it interesting today when we literally have thousands of jobs available, that we have people that don't want to go to work. About 40%, 30% of those that are in this population actually have coverage. They already have coverage. They will be forced off of coverage and onto Medicaid. So that's a cost that actually hurts the hospitals because they're getting a higher reimbursement rate from insurance than they will from Medicaid. And for us, you know, we're trying to also help out Medicaid. We're working on right now increasing the Medicaid reimbursement rates that our hospitals and doctors receive, which we believe that's going to help the system out a lot.
Okay, we're going to get into that a little bit
Yep.
more later. But before we go there, speaking of work, right, the bill being proposed by the governor, it does include work requirements, but with some exemptions. Some of those exemptions include full-time students in post-secondary educational institutions or technical colleges, parents or guardians of dependent children under 18 or incapacitated adults, individuals unfit for employment or experiencing hardship as determined by the KDHE secretary or with pending applications for supplemental security income or Social Security disability insurance, individuals with permanent partial disabilities, and then also volunteers working at least 20 hours per week at nonprofit organizations, homeless individuals, veterans, former foster youth under age 22. Mm-hmm. It's a long list. Yep. However, there's still a bill in the Senate, so if the Senate takes it up, we could see some movement there. Do these work requirements, though, effectively address concerns about Medicaid expansion not serving the most vulnerable? And Speaker Hawkins, what are your thoughts on that?
No, they don't. In actuality, there has the Biden administration has not allowed a single work requirement to go through. So I think there's been 13 of them proposed, and every one of them has been declined. This one is really interesting because all you really have to do to get to qualify through this work requirement is to once a year show that you have gotten a paycheck. It doesn't have any definition of how much you have to work. It just once a year you have to prove that you have worked sometime during that year. And that's not really a work requirement. And quite frankly, the administration is not going to allow that to go through. So it's really easy for the governor to propose that because she knows it's not going to go through as well.
Director Holman, what's your take? Do these work requirements work, do you think?
Well, I first of all want to say that the Alliance for Healthy Kansas does not support work requirements. And one of the reasons is because the majority of people who are in the Medicaid expansion population are already working. We know that 69% of the people in this population are working at least one job, if not multiple jobs. And of the remaining 31% who are not working, so many of them are people who have a child under the age of 18 at home and are caregivers to that child, caregivers to family members who have a disability or are seniors. There are a lot of people who have a disability themselves who are in that population and are not well enough to work. We see that in particular in that population between, say, age 60 and 65, where people are getting close to being eligible for Medicare, and they're starting to see things break down in their bodies and more illnesses happen. So, I think from our perspective, because such a large majority of people are already working, the work reporting requirements just end up being another hoop for people to jump through, and we don't want to see any additional barriers being there that would prohibit people from getting access to the affordable care they need.
Okay, and so what your argument is, they are working, they just don't meet that coverage requirement, and Speaker Hawkins, you're saying that? I
think one of the interesting facts that came out during the hearing that we had, and this came from KHI, 40% of this population is between 19 and 25, 40%. So it's really a young population. And you don't see all the disability in the young. So I think there's, I think a lot of times you can make things seem worse than what they are. But these people, 19 to 25 can go to work, and that's 40% of the population. 30% of the population already have coverage, so we're going to take them off of coverage. So you're talking now 70%, there's 30% left.
Okay. April?
Could I just clarify? So in the KHI report, they are saying that 69% of the people are working. So that gets back to that young population that we're talking about. That data does not show that they're not working. It just shows that they're probably working in low-wage jobs and struggling, which kind of makes sense when you think about people starting out in their careers. And so I just wanted to kind of make that clarification that we're not saying that all of the people have a disability who are in the Medicaid expansion population. There are a variety of reasons that people don't have access to health insurance through their employer, or they're not able to afford the employee contribution. So that's really who we're talking about, who are in this coverage gap, as opposed to people only having like one thing. Like everyone doesn't have a disability, everyone doesn't have employer-sponsored insurance that they can't afford. It addresses a lot of shortfalls that occur throughout the state on a regular basis.
Bob, what are your thoughts on this debate?
Well, it's interesting. It's really how individuals, states, groups, countries look at healthcare. And every industrialized country in the world has national health care except the United States. That's fine. It's the U.S. choice to do that. Bill Clinton tried it in the 90s and it didn't go through. Barack Obama, with Obamacare, put in almost a piecemeal system, knowing that he couldn't get a national health care system through. And interestingly enough, when it was written, they really did not think any state would refuse Medicaid expansion. It's kind of naive, I guess. They honestly thought no state will refuse this because it's such a good deal in terms of the money that comes from the feds. But again, this is America, and a number of states said, no, we'd rather not do this. Our political culture is such that it is. But it's been a number of years now, and slowly but surely more and more states have decided to do it, including some recalcitrant states in which they went to the initiative petition and actually just the people voted for it. Mm-hmm. So it's really how a state or a group of people within a state and their political culture look at health care. Is it something that's sort of a luxury and I've got it and you don't, you need to work for it? Or is it something that, almost like a public good? It benefits the entire state, everybody from A to Z, if we're all healthy. And that's really the debates that have gone on in states, and I think this is indicative of that. And really, the people of Kansas have to decide how they view healthcare, I think, before, something's going to happen.
Bob, you also mentioned money. We're going to get into that right after the break. We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
Vanderbilt's has one of the largest selections of boots and jeans in the area. Save $45 on durable Wolverine Overpass boots. Sale price $119.99. New style, check out Timberland Titan EV boots, $149.99. Save $26 on these comfortable Iron Age work boots, $119.99. Great selection of FXD work pants in store now.
Work boots center, Vanderbilt.
No mo FOMO, no more fear of missing out. The Topeka Symphony Orchestra presents Italy Travel. Experience the Topeka Symphony on March 30th at White Concert Hall.
It seems that everyone is pretty important to the health of everyone else these days. We try to separate, but life has a way of catching up to us, and pretty soon we're in the swim again. It would help if everyone had access to health care. That's why there's a Grace Med, to be a medical home for everyone, a place where you can get just about every kind of health care that everyone needs, regardless of your ability to pay, because everyone deserves the kind of hope that only good health can bring. Grace Med, hope care for everyone.
Ladyfingers Automotive, family-owned auto repair with hands that understand your vehicle. Quality repairs done at an affordable cost. When you're in need of service, repair, or towing, remember Ladyfingers Automotive.
Protect your home from sudden power outages with a Generac home standby generator installed by Shockwave Electric certified experts. Call Shockwave Electric for all your commercial and residential electrical services.
Okay, Dad, look at you.
I look nice, don't I?
I see you.
Yeah.
Adding your own flavor to fashion comes with age.
Let's go.
Oh, man, that's the best one yet.
Forgetting how to add doesn't. Finding it difficult to work with numbers may be a sign of Alzheimer's.
Dad, are you okay?
An early diagnosis can help improve the quality of life for your loved one.
High school. Yeah.
Hey, Dad. Do you want to talk about what happened earlier?
Learn the warning signs of Alzheimer's. Some things come with age. Some others don't.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung. We're continuing our conversation on Medicaid expansion. Now, the next topic is the cost. There's been incentives to expand with the promise of a 90% match rate from the feds, but opponents are skeptical because they're wondering how much would this really cost? Now, Bob, how much would expansion cost based on your findings?
That's a trick question. No, I'm joking because there's been multiple studies. And one of the studies that I read recently said, well, it depends on the state, and there's so many factors that go into it. But a couple important points. One is I think it's the first couple of years. It's all federal money, and there's recently been an incentive, from the Biden administration, cutting 5%, adding 5% of more federal money to get states that have not joined to do it. So the first few years are, essentially free, not actually better than free because it's all paid for and that money's flowing to the state. But then, yes, states have to start paying for it. The studies show some states complain. This is more than we thought it was going to be. Others, to my point earlier, are, hey, this is a good deal. What we're paying is great. We're happy to pay for it because what we're getting does tend to fall a little bit along some political lines. But it's really, again, I know there's costs associated with it, but it's really what the people of a particular state think it's worth. It's a good deal if that's what you want, because instead of the state having to pay all the costs to help these people get insurance, they're getting a big hand from the federal government, and so they see it as a good deal even if it costs more. So, but we're talking maybe 200 million to 350 million over 10 years are some of the estimates I've seen.
All right, how much is it worth, Speaker Hawkins? What is the holdup, do you think, on this?
So I've been in this arena clear back to the start. And in the start, the KDHE had a study done. It was done by Aon, and Aon's a huge company, and they did the actuarial study. I actually, if I would have had my personal computer here today, I would have had those numbers exactly, and I'd brought them with me, but I didn't have didn't have my personal computer here. So, but I kind of know close. So that study in KHI, really their numbers mirrored pretty close to what the Aon study was. But 65 million is the cost generally. I mean, you can use other funds to lower that, but 65 million is about the amount. It's a 90-10 match, so it's going to be around 700 and some million that the feds have to put into it to kind of start out, and that's going to grow over time because, quite frankly, our caseloads grow over time. They always do. Our caseloads for Medicaid grow about 100 million a year, so it's a very fast increasing program. Our program is it just takes a lot of money. So the cost is there. Now, how do you fund it, and how do you fund it for the long term? And in some states right now are truly suffering. Indiana's the latest. Indiana is $1 billion in the hole right now this year. When I talked to some of my friends back there, I said, "What are you going to do?" And they said, "We're struggling with that." And then all of a sudden it came out just recently in the news that they're actually going to close that gap by taking away benefits from the people who have been on Medicaid for a long time. They're not taking it away from the expansion population. They're actually taking it away from the caretakers of the people that take care of disabled people. And that's something that we've talked about a lot and said, you know, there's a cost, and when the cost gets too great, they're going to have to cut benefits. And when the federal government can no longer pay the cost, and that day is coming, that 90-10 match will end and it'll go to a 60-40 match, and that will truly put states in a death spiral when it comes to the fiscal nature of Medicaid expansion.
Director Holman, before we move on, would you like to respond?
Certainly, yes. I have a couple of responses to some of the things that Speaker Hawkins said. So I am familiar with what's happening in Indiana, and the shortfall that they have in their Medicaid doesn't have anything to do with the Medicaid expansion population. It has to do with the HCBS, home and community-based services, and also the frail and elderly population. So the problem that they had there was a missed estimate of how many people would be served and how much it would cost. So this idea that somehow Medicaid expansion is the cause for that $1 billion deficit does not reflect what we're hearing from that state about the source of their shortfall. I think that I'd also like to just point out that under the Kansas Health Institute report, that estimated costs, they found that because Kansas, as would any newly expanded state, would receive a signing bonus, an incentive to, if we were to expand our eligibility for Medicaid, that would actually result in a positive net cost to the state of Kansas. So we would bring in additional money for the first and second year because that signing bonus is just for the first 2 years. But certainly if the state wanted to hold on to that money for the purpose of paying for expansion, that would go out almost 8 years. So under the KHI report, they found that it would cost about $171 million of state money over the course of 10 years. So I think when you look at it that way, it's a relatively small cost, and you're benefiting a large number of Kansans as well as the providers who take care of them.
All right. We're going to move on now to rural hospitals. So, Director Holman, some people worry about the cost of not expanding, right? They argue that Medicaid expansion could be a tool for rural hospitals in Kansas. They're at risk of closing, but how much of a tool is really the question? So, if you could respond to that as well.
Absolutely. So, at the Alliance, we've never said that expansion is a silver bullet to take care of all of the issues that are faced by rural hospitals. We know that there are probably going to need to be some changes in the way that healthcare is delivered in rural areas. And we think that, that process is happening right now today of finding those innovations and ways to take care of some of the challenges that are being faced. But regardless of what new system is rolled out, there needs to be a payer source for people who don't have insurance and fall into the coverage gap. And so in that way, we see expansion as a way to bolster the financial stability of rural hospitals and to really give them some time to be able to be around while this innovation is happening, because hospitals, particularly in rural areas, are the lifeblood of the community. And they're the key to being able to bring in new businesses in many cases and to keep the population there in the community. So, I think that it's very important to rural hospitals, not the only answer that needs to happen.
Speaker Hawkins, what's your take?
Well, the Alliance may have never said that, but the governor has said it many times. I remember when Fort Scott closed, Fort Scott Hospital immediately came out. Medicaid expansion would have solved that. Even the CEO said no, it would have kept us open maybe 2 months, not 2 years. If you have a company, let's just leave healthcare alone. If you have a company that's losing $15 million and they get $2 million, how do they stay open? They're still losing $13 million. And that's what's happened at virtually every hospital that is closed in the state of Kansas. She is right. It's not the silver bullet for rural healthcare. Matter of fact, I wouldn't even say this is a silver bullet, but it sure helps. Getting the reimbursement rates for Medicaid is so important for the rural hospitals, getting that up. And we decided this year that was one of the things that we were going to spend a lot of money on, and it's close to, I think it's 70 million or 80 million that we have put into that effort, raising reimbursement rates for doctors 15% and for hospitals 30%. And that truly, when you look at our reimbursement rates, it's deplorable. I mean, I'm quite frankly, when you have Medicare paying X and you have Medicaid paying minus 80%, that's bad. We had one code, it was amazing. We had one code that was $600 on Medicare and $48 on Medicaid. That's just impossible. And so one of the things that we have to do is to raise the Medicaid reimbursement rates, and that's really going to help. I believe that actually helps the hospitals more than Medicaid expansion ever can.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that more too as well. But before that, another question here, another concern that came up as the potential for an increase in Medicaid fraud if we do expand. So is that a valid concern, Bob, do you think?
Of course it is.
Sure.
Yes, it's probably one of the biggest challenges for state governments in the next 10 years. We saw what happened during COVID with unemployment claims and Medicare, and that would no doubt, I guess I would argue that if Medicaid expansion did occur, I would say it certainly should go hand in hand with a system that can stop fraud, because it's been really bad in Kansas along with other states. So yeah, it's a definite concern.
Okay, and Speaker Hawkins, what are your thoughts?
We do have a Medicaid Inspector General, and that department is growing simply because of the amount of fraud that's happening in Medicaid. And really, if you went to the federal level and looked at Medicare, there's just a lot of fraud in healthcare, and rooting it out is sometimes very difficult. And so we actually have had inspector general since probably somewhere around 17 or 18, Sarah Furtick. She was our first inspector general, and Sarah did a fantastic job. We do have a different one now, and they're really trying to boost that office, really grow it a lot, but simply because of the amount of fraud that they're finding. So he's right. We just have a lot of fraud in government. We see what happened in our, like you said, in COVID, during on our unemployment system. It was just deplorable how much money we lost.
Yeah, most people don't even know. The Attorney General, whoever it is, gets a lot of attention for various things, but actually one of the main jobs of the Attorney General in Kansas is fraud, Social Security fraud, Medicare fraud, and that hundreds of millions of dollars every single year going after that.
Well, April, or Director Holman, rather, what is your take on this argument when it comes to increasing Medicaid fraud with Medicaid expansion?
Well, I was actually going to say something similar to what Speaker Hawkins said, except maybe with a little bit of a different twist. We have full confidence in the office, the Attorney General's office, and the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General, and so we believe that they will be able to identify and prosecute when there are cases of fraud. That's not a real concern to me because I think that they'll be able to take care of it.
All right, thank you all. When we come back, we're talking about alternatives. What other options are on the table? We'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
What makes Washburn different? Opportunity. The opportunity of a true community. Because every moment, every connection makes a difference. As part of the Ichabod family, you'll gain new skills, make lifelong friends, expand your horizons, and build your future. You might even collect a few memories along the way. I belong.
We belong.
You belong at Washburn.
Growing the market for Kansas-made E15 is a win-win for Kansans. What's E15? It's fuel with 15% ethanol compared to the usual 10% in regular unleaded. E15 is more affordable, has better performance, and runs cleaner than regular unleaded, meaning Kansas drivers can go further for less. From helping Kansas farm families by stabilizing grain prices, helping Kansas become more energy independent, and adding more than 4,000 jobs in Kansas, more of our money stays right here at home because of ethanol. Visit fuelbykansas.com to find a station near you.
Crown Volkswagen, celebrating 30 years of quality service.
Come experience
what sets us apart from the rest.
Come experience.
Come experience.
Come in and experience the Crown difference.
Volkswagen Tiguan models now 0% APR for 60 months or get a $2,000 customer bonus. Get into an Atlas or Atlas Cross Sport, just 1.9 APR for 60 months or a $3,000 customer bonus.
Crown Volkswagen. Visit crownmotorsvw.com.
At Long John Silver's, feed your sea tooth with efficient shrimp platter. 2 heavyweights of the high seas dipped in our signature batter and fried to golden perfection. Pair your platter with Wisconsin white cheddar cheese bites and ride a wave of melty goodness. Order ahead at longjohnsilvers.com. Fish yeah!
My baby's back from the West Coast.
Here are those pictures that you asked for your school project? First day of school, cute as a button.
So long ago.
Oh, here's Grandma Florence after that flood wiped out the whole neighborhood.
Sometimes I just cannot believe all the storms we've gone through here.
I can only hope that we'll be able to leave this house to you one day, baby. You're our legacy.
Planning for these disasters will make sure we're safe, and is the best way to protect that legacy.
Ah, those beans smell heavenly.
Give Mom a little credit.
You know what? We should make an emergency communication plan. That way we're ready this year.
Oh,
great idea.
At my dorm, we have emergency kits for earthquakes and wildfires, but I'm sure there's something more local I can send you with the link.
Okay.
Smart.
I'm coming to share with you guys.
Protect your legacy. Plan for natural disasters today. Visit ready.gov/plan.
27 News is working for you with more local news, weather, sports, and more original local programming that matters to you. 27 News, working for you.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung. Now we're talking about other options that are on the table for Kansas lawmakers. And right now, one of the alternatives to Medicaid expansion that's being discussed is raising medical reimbursement rates. So how could that impact health care costs, do you think, Speaker Hawkins?
Well, it's certainly going to impact the providers, and that's what it's intended to do. Our providers, the reimbursement rates are so low for Medicaid. It's really deplorable where we're at, and it hasn't been touched in years. I think before the doctors received a small 3% raise last year, it had been 19 years since they had received an increase in their reimbursement rate. Hospitals about the same, about 20 years. And there's truly a huge chasm between what Medicare would pay and what Medicaid pays. And it's not something that we can correct overnight because it's very costly. We're going to spend somewhere around $70 million this year just doing what we're doing, and that's a 30% increase for the hospitals and a 15% increase for the doctors. So we're going to have to do that over several year period. It's not just going to be a one-time thing. We're going to have to continue doing that. And that's okay. We understand that. But for hospitals, raising the reimbursement rate is truly a necessary thing, and I truly think that as we get to where there's more parity there, the hospitals will stop feeling quite as much pinch as what they have. You know, really, when you look at the whole system, if you go back to when Obamacare started, the ACA, I'm sorry, I didn't really mean to do that, but I don't really look at the ACA as a political thing. I really don't. The ACA is really baked into our system now, and everybody knows what it is. But the ACA took away money from rural health care in the form of Medicare. Reimbursements went down. And that really is what's hurt the hospitals, is that a lot of their money was coming from Medicare, and then they thought it was going to come from Medicaid, so they lost money, and then there was no money to come in behind it. So that's the reason why, for us, it's pretty important for us to raise the Medicaid reimbursement rates.
Bob, what are your thoughts on this debate? Because it seems like raising reimbursement rates, Medicaid expansion, it would help with healthcare access, but in different ways, right?
Well, I still call it Obamacare. Maybe I'm just getting old now, and it's hard to. But it's interesting because I remember interviewing Governor Brownback and around that time when the ACA was passed, and I remember him saying, "Well, we still have people on the waiting list. We got to take care of that first." And that sort of ties into reimbursement rates as well, which is this idea: hey, we have to take care of these things. Problem is, okay, but Kansas did not take care of those things. And so it almost became this loopy argument not to have Medicaid expansion. Oh, we can't do that because we got these other things. And I always thought, well, okay, let's do the other things. And then Kansas didn't do the other things. So that's people in the past. And so they certainly need to be done. And the big question is, could both be done, Medicaid expansion and the others? Some would argue yes, but there's others that say, no, we don't want to do those at the same time.
Well, Director Holman, do you think raising reimbursement rates would be effective as well?
I think they're long overdue. So I would absolutely agree about that. I don't think that they're a substitute for Medicaid expansion. So when you look at expansion, you're helping over 150,000 consumers gain access to affordable health coverage, and through the Medicaid program. And so we are really talking about apples and oranges here. I absolutely think those reimbursement rates should go up, and I think that it will help in many ways, but it does not provide the same coverage and service that Medicaid expansion would to those consumers who are in the coverage gap now and working hard, but just not making enough to be able to get those subsidies on the ACA. So yeah, I think very important, not a substitute for expansion. And really, when we look at other alternatives too that have been proposed instead of doing expansion, they all come largely at a cost directly to the state. So state general fund dollars are making up a large part of that difference. Whereas with Medicaid expansion, we would be able to take advantage of that enhanced match rate where 90% of the cost is being borne by the federal government, and Kansas specific taxpayers are only paying for 10% of the cost. So it really doesn't make sense to me why we would want to think about alternatives, again, not necessarily the rates, but other types of things that would take care of part of the issue that expansion might do, but it costs more and it doesn't cover the same people and people all over the state in the same way.
Okay, let's also talk about the disability wait list, because this was a concern raised by some Republicans during hearings. And so Representative Will Carpenter, he said he's worried about expanding care to 150,000 Kansans when there's still thousands of people on the disability wait list. Is there a link here? Would expanding impede this? Can we do both? Speaker Hawkins, what are your thoughts?
Well, first off, I would say I'd push back against Bob just a little bit on Brownback's time period. He actually did away at one point with the wait list on physical disability. Did away with it totally for one day. And then it started filling back up. And that's the way a wait list works. I mean, it truly is, it's really kind of a strange thing. It is important for us to do away with that wait list. It truly is, because we have people, and it costs a lot of money. Why haven't we, I mean, we've got 6,000 people on that wait list right now. It would cost us hundreds of millions of dollars to do away with that. And quite frankly, Will Carpenter, Representative Carpenter, would tell you, we do not have the services out there to be able to absorb those people right now. And so what they've done this last few years is they've really been working at building the reimbursement rates for those companies who handle those people. That way they can build up the capacity to be able to handle them. And so they put a lot of money into that. Now this year, actually we have been on the governor for quite a while to appropriate, I mean not appropriate, but to budget. She provides the budget, we work from her budget, but she never would. She would never put money in there for the wait list. And so we decided this year to do it ourselves. And once she found out that we were going to do it, she came in with a governor's budget amendment to kind of jump in front and take a little bit of credit. That's fine. So we just doubled it. She said 250. We went on ahead and doubled it to 500 people that we want to get off there. But also to put a requirement in that budget bill that there could never be any more than 4,800, which is still too many on that wait list. So even after we take those 500 off, we're just starting. We still got a long ways to go to work through that. So that's important for us, because these are people that have been on the wait list for anywhere from 10 to 13, 14 years, and they're going to remain on there until we have the money to get them off.
Well, how much money do you think it would cost?
Oh, it costs. So when Sam Brownback worked on that one wait list back, I think he put $65 million in to get, back then was a small amount, 1,000 people off of the PD wait list. Not the physically disabled is much less complex than the IDD. The IDD is very, very difficult. They have many, many different problems that you have to be able to deal with, and they're so much more expensive. So the PD wait list was very easy to do away with. The IDD is very difficult, and it just takes a lot more money. I would say probably for us to do away with that whole wait list, probably $500 million. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot.
And Bob, I'm going to have you weigh in on the debate soon, but first, Director Holman, I wanted to get your take on this. Would this impede expanding Medicaid? Can you do both?
I think you certainly can do both. It's like comparing investing in roads to reducing the waiting lists. The Medicaid expansion funding is a completely separate funding stream from those HCBS waivers that have the waiting lists. And so really the legislature absolutely has the opportunity to put more money in and to deal with the shortage in caregivers that might exist and might be impeding the progress there, and still do Medicaid expansion, particularly because we're not looking at a cost for Medicaid expansion in the first couple of years at least, no matter how you look at it. So I also know that many of the people who are attendant caregivers for people who have a disability and may be on the waiting list are actually people who fall into the coverage gap. So it would help those individuals to be healthy enough to be in the workforce and perhaps be providing those exact services.
Okay, and Bob, I'm going to have you weigh in here. First of all, let's talk about the larger debate over the disability wait list right now, and then can both issues, do you think, be addressed in one session?
In one session? Theoretically, they could be. It's really, it goes back to something I said earlier. It's really, well, let me take one quick step back. Federal government, they can borrow money, you know, and they do, and they have a huge debt, trillions of dollars. State governments, they have to have a budget. If they go into debt, you know, we're in trouble. And Kansas has been through that, the highs and the lows. So really it's priorities. I mean, sometimes the federal government will say we got priorities, but it's everything. But state governments really have to have priorities, to the speaker's point of how much things cost. And so it goes back to what I said. Could a state do both and spend that much money? If that's their priority, they can. But Kansas tends to have very high priorities, at least going back about 15 years, for tax policies is a big one. And that takes a lot of money. If that's the state's priority, we've had some big tax cuts. We're still talking about them now, and they can cost money. And initially, even some years ago, the argument was, oh, trickle-down economics, don't worry, this won't cost any money. Kansas found out, no, it does cost money, and that's fine if you're going to cut taxes. So right now, again, the priority is not for Medicaid expansion. And you're right, there's been more movement lately to try to get these lists down, but they're very, very expensive. They're probably going to cost more than we think. But again, the culture of the state has to be, it's worth it. With tax cuts, that's almost always the answer. Oh, this is worth it, it's going to be great, it's going to bring in new business. And that's the priority. But other states will do that with health care.
All right, we'll be right back. You're watching Inside Kansas Politics.
Have a cute kid? Sign up today at KSNT.com and we may feature them in the news. Featured kids will receive an achievement award from Bonkers. Watch 27 News weekday mornings to see if we feature your kid. Cute Kid of the Day is sponsored by Bonkers.
Get 0.9% APR on this Buick Envision. Plus, current eligible non-GM owners get $3,500 purchase allowance, plus no monthly payments for 90 days. See Cable Dahmer or Briggs Buick today.
Find great authentic Mexican food at the Mexican Taco Shop. Our locations at 1901 Southwest 10th in Topeka and 419 West 6th in Junction City are always open. Dine in, drive through, or carry out. Or visit our 37th and Burlingame location. Open 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Quick lunches between 1 and 1:30, plus free coffee. 3 convenient locations, 2 in Topeka and 1 in Junction City. Take a short trip to Mexico at the Mexican Taco Shop.
The story of Grace Med has always been told through its people, both those who serve and those who it is our honor to serve. We meet at the intersection of compassion and vulnerability, bringing health where there was illness and hope where there was despair. Our patients come to us bearing the weight of living in the margins, and we share the love of Jesus Christ with them by providing compassionate quality health care for all their physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. Because health restored is always hope renewed. Find hope today by scheduling an appointment with Grace Med.
Vanderbilt's has one of the largest selections of boots and jeans in the area. Save $20 on these Ariat Rebar Flex boots. Our price, $159.99. Made in the USA Carolina work boots. Our price, $189.99. Our best-selling Carhartt pocket tees are in stock now. Check out our comfortable and stylish Wrangler short sleeve shirts, $17.99.
Your work boots center, Vanderbilt.
Topeka, you've spoken, and thanks to you, Devon James wins. Dustin Devon was voted Best Personal Injury Attorney, and Devon James was voted Best Law Firm in the Topeka 2023 Official Community's Choice Awards.
Thank you, Topeka,
for making Devon James your choice of law firms.
Best Law Firm and Best Personal Injury Attorney. If you've been injured, Devon James wins. Call 888-8888.
27 News leads with over 29 hours of original local programming per week, hours more than our competitor, including shows like K-Nation and Inside Kansas Politics. More news, more weather, more sports. 27 News, working for you.
Welcome back to Inside Kansas Politics. I'm Rebecca Chung. We're wrapping up our discussion now. And before we go, I want to talk about the next steps, because some people are skeptical about whether Medicaid expansion will even come up for debate this year. We still have that bill in the Senate. Not much traction there. Bob, what's your take?
I was surprised there was hearings, but I guess I'm a cynic. I think the speaker can tell us best. Hey, this is America. It's democracy. It's politics. And he can tell us. He's talked before about whether he thinks the votes are there or not. The governor claims they are, and so I defer to the speaker. It seems like there's other things this year that need to be hammered out. I think a lot of people would rather not see a special session. So I would say it's probably be quite difficult to shoehorn that in the rest of this year.
Okay, and Speaker Hawkins, what are your thoughts? Could we see this gain traction, and if not, what other proposals could make it to the governor's desk?
I think today was indicative of what will happen. They worked the bill in committee, in the Health Committee, in the House side. It failed. It did not move out. The governor says that there's a vote there. I know my body very well. I count my votes all the time. One thing that I am probably the best at is counting votes. And I can tell you there are not 63 votes there. There are not even 55 votes there. So she can talk about there being votes there. There's not. The Senate side, I never try to predict what the Senate's going to do. Believe me, I would love to, but I would be wrong what they're going to do. So we'll let them decide on that. I would say that we will continue working really hard to make sure the Medicaid reimbursement rates get through the budget cycle. We're still in the budget cycle. We're not done yet. That's going to happen this next week. We'll have conference committees starting to work on the budget, and hopefully maybe by the end of next week we will see that through. And that really kind of gives us a good look at where we're going to be at. We still have one budget left at the very end of session. As Bob said, tax is the big thing. Both on the governor's side and on our side, we feel like we do need to have tax relief, and we're working very diligently on that. Met with the governor today. I wouldn't say we made a lot of headway. It was it was just an interesting conversation we had with really neither side agreeing on much of anything. So we got probably a long way to go on that, but that will work its way out. We're going to have tax relief before we leave. So I think that's kind of where it ends up. It really does.
Okay. And something interesting that came up during hearings, they did say, they had the argument about the disability wait list, addressing that first before Medicaid expansion. But they did also say, before we even talk about Medicaid. So could they, I guess, come up with a proposal for Medicaid expansion in the future then, do you think? Do you think this is an issue that's could come up again?
This year?
Another session.
Oh, guarantee it will. There's no doubt. You don't even have to think about that.
But a hearing, do you think?
We've had a lot of hearings. It was interesting. April knows how many hearings we had. I started out as health chair, and I had 3 days of hearing the first time I did it, 3 days. So we've had hearings all the way along. Have we had a bill make it out of committee and to the floor? Never, I don't think. I can't remember if ever a bill making it out of committee to the floor. How it comes to the floor is through an amendment, and we have debate. And what's the interesting thing about it is one time, so I think it's probably 17, it made it across the House floor, made it through the Senate, and to our governor, Brownback at the time, and he vetoed it. The next time was in the 19 to 20 time frame, when it made it across the House floor, made it to the Senate, and the governor had it won. She was winning. I always say she had us down 24-0, kind of like one of the games with the Chiefs. We were down 24-0, and she decided to shift her attention to value them both, which she didn't have any say in it, but she made a big deal out of it and made Susan Weigel make the proclamation that she would never do Medicaid expansion until Value Them Both won. And so the governor had the ability then. It was going. It was going through the Senate. It was going to head to the governor, and the governor just took her eye off the ball. And so it would be here today if she hadn't done that. You would agree?
Well, what I would do is say that I think you were the last chairman in the House that allowed a bill hearing on expansion. Yes, it has not happened since 2017.
Time flies when
you're having fun. It does fly when you're having fun. There has been a round table back in 2019, but the last time there was an actual bill hearing was 2017 in the House.
April knows, I guarantee you.
I forgot that it went to Governor Brownback. So
it did.
I forgot about that.
And back during that time, I know this might be just a little off script, but I actually didn't know what he was going to do. There was some people that actually thought he might sign it, and some people thought he might veto. Well, he ended up vetoing it. But most people really didn't know what he would do.
So classic. The legislature passes it, and the governor vetoes it, and then the next governor wants it, and then the legislature doesn't pass it. So, that's a little bit of history there.
And Director Holman, what's your take? Any final thoughts on this?
Yes, absolutely. We have 4 bills for expansion that are exempt and alive until the end of this session. We're not giving up as advocates for expansion, even though I'm hearing that the odds are stacked against us. I would say that I really hope that as we move forward, we will find a way to be able to negotiate some sort of compromise on expansion. Certainly 40 states have already done this, red and blue states. We are seeing the expansion past the Republican House in Mississippi a couple of weeks ago. This is a foregone conclusion that expansion is not going away. So when we look at our decision to turn this money that would help us in a number of ways in Kansas away, I think we really need to think of ways that we can find a solution that makes everybody comfortable, where we can help utilize those funds and do good for our state.
But then it also still faces opposition in the Senate as well from Senate Republican leaders. So how do you see that going on that side?
This year, I think I would respectfully disagree with Speaker Hawkins. I think we do have the votes on the floor, but we don't necessarily have votes to go against leadership. And so where we have private conversations with legislators and they say, I know that my constituents want this, but my speaker does not, and we're not going to be able to get it to a vote. That gives me hope that there is an opportunity if we ever were able to just have a clean vote on the floor of the House or Senate.
And the political side is the governor, as we all know, has started a political action committee, seemingly well-funded. They've announced some of the races they're targeting. So Medicaid expansion, if it doesn't happen as a bill this session, it's going to be very prominent in the 2024 Kansas elections.
All right, thank you all. And that was your look inside Kansas politics. If you want to keep up to date on all things Kansas politics, then follow us on social media. Follow us on X at InKSPolitics and on Facebook. Just search Inside Kansas Politics. We'll also post the full video on YouTube. Just search KSNT News. And check ksnt.com/inside-kansas-politics for past episodes. If you have a story you want Kansas state legislators to hear or topics you think we should cover, let us know. You can email us at ikp@ksnt.com. We'll see you right here, same time, same place. Have a good day.